my portion of the project, I'm going to be focusing on the sites themselves to include the installation process, the data we collected, and along with the challenges and opportunities that we have. So as you can see, here are the installation steps that we followed to get these sites ready, starting off with a preliminary soil sample and analysis that then moved to site preparation to include mowing and clearing the sites of debris. Weed control had to be applied, which we could then stake out the planting layout. When that was completed, we were able to start drilling to a depth of 3 feet, which we then planted the tree stakes to be backfilled with native soils. And then as a last step, we recorded any planting conditions and changes to the design. So then moving into the original data collection schedule, this is how the greening was planning to record the progress of the project, starting off with an exploratory soil sampling at year 1. That would then move to a comprehensive soil sampling at year 1, 5, and 10 after the growing season. We also wanted to monitor the survivability and tree growth, so we plan to do that 3 times a year, and also take samples from plant tissues from the roots and the core. But unfortunately, due to funding, we haven't been able to collect year 5 or 10 samples of either the soil or plant tissue. So here we have an example of a comprehensive soil sample taken from our Toledo site in 2013. This specific one was testing for arsenic levels that were above the residential criteria level. So if I could get this. So this blue line right here shows the residential criteria level for arsenic at 7.6 milligrams. And here you could see which plots that exceeded that level, the highest being 11.6 milligrams here. And then this graph on the right shows the anticipated cost of testing Toledo again in 2017. And this is just for testing a Q2 plot. And that would cost over $12,000. But as you can see here, that's testing for heavy metals and PAHs in the soil and also the tissue in 2017. So then moving on, I want to provide some background on each of our 4 active sites, starting off with Toledo Street. This site is owned by the Michigan Land Bank and was zoned industrial for Ward Bakery. The structures here were removed in 1995 along with the underground storage tanks. And a brownfield assessment was conducted here and detected PNAs, PCBs, lead, and arsenic above the residential criteria level. So at this site, we planted 648 trees on 3.7 acres starting in 2011. And the pictures on the lower right-hand side show our site visit with Ron and his team back in October last year. Site number 2, we have Leonard Street. This was previously used as a Detroit public school, which has since been demolished. This is our largest dendro site at just over 5 acres, with which we planted 1,400 trees here. This site has a bit of a social conflict tied to it because once the school was demolished, the community went ahead and was using this as a park space, but they were unaware of the contaminants there. So now the site, it's fenced off with our dendro trees and can no longer be accessed by the residents. This is an aerial view of Leonard where you can see the Q1 and Q2 plots. I'll show those again. Q1's up here, Q2's here. The white plots were planted in 2015 and the green plots were planted in 2014. Here's just another picture of Leonard to show the growth in 1 year. The top picture is 2014, the top picture is 2015. Today these trees are well over 30 feet. Moving on to our 3rd site, we have Nevada Avenue. This site, like Toledo, is also owned by the Michigan Land Bank. The previous land use can be inferred as heavily industrial, which included having a lead smelter from 1955 to 1983. Nevada is our smallest dendro site with 216 trees planted on it on just over 1 acre. This site had to be planted in an L shape instead of the standard rectangular shape due to the presence of aggregate in the soil and being able to drill for the trees. And then our last site, Ferry Park. This site is owned by the Henry Ford Health System. Previous uses were for engineering and steel companies and was once used as a Coney Island restaurant for anyone who's familiar with Detroit. Structures were removed in 2011. And last fall, we had a site visit with a few representatives from Henry Ford, the city, and the U.S. Forest Service to talk about the potential for the site to be more education-based for residents since there's a lot of foot traffic that walks past here. Here's an aerial drawing of what Ferry Park should look like. Then moving on, this graph measures the overall survivability of species in 2017. We should note that in 2017 we had 8 active dendro sites instead of the 4 we have today. So looking at this chart, you can see that the willows did a lot better than the poplar species did. So then to note some of our project challenges, those could be categorized into 3 groups: community engagement, design and implementation, and funding. For community engagement, perception of the project proved to be a bit challenging, mostly due to the white suits that the crew members had to wear as PPE. That caused a bit of concern, even though this was introduced to the community before the project began. And then also, again, the community use of the residents using Leonard as a park, unaware of the contamination levels. For design and implementation, the presence of aggregate, debris, unmapped foundations led to significant site layout changes. And then lastly, with funding, the lack of long-term funding impacted the greening's ability to sample and conduct frequent maintenance. And it also led to inconsistent record keeping during staff transitions. So we weren't able to conduct as many mortality surveys or document tree growth as much as we would have liked to. But on the flip side, there are quite a bit of opportunities and next steps around this project. The biggest one being the Greening of Detroit and U.S. Forest Service partnering together to collect these soil tissue and leaf samples from these sites so that we can continue to record remediation data. Also, the potential for funding in 2020, we can start sampling for the plots planted in 2015 to stay on track. Also, due to high mortality rates at Toledo, there's some talk of potentially planting new genotypes at that site. And then also just continue working with city representatives to keep them engaged and potentially planning for Ferry Park to become more of a community benefit or education sustainability model. So with that summary, we wanted to thank you for listening and turn it back to Phil to moderate any questions.